All right, everybody. I'm sorry I can't be there today. Actually, that's a lie. Um, no, I really am sorry I can't be there today. But anyway, uh, we're going to do just a little lecture on Renaissance art. And if you guys want to take notes, you can. If you don't want to, that's fine. But I would tell you if at any point, like there will be a few slides with some stuff on it that you might want to jot down. If at any point you want to slow down and stop, just have Mr. Holland hit the pause button and you can jot some stuff down. All right, so we're going to talk about Renaissance art and the beginning of modern painting. This is um, we talked a little bit about this. This is two examples of um, medieval art, and you can notice there that it's very flat looking. It's very two-dimensional. There's no perspective. There's no real depth to it. There's not really much in the way of use of shadows or anything like that. And we're going to get into a little bit of that today. And this is an early Renaissance piece. I don't know who it's by. I tried to find out. But you can see, though, that there are some things that when we go on through the presentation, you'll kind of start to figure out. Not so much the use of the triangles, but there's definite use of shadows and perspective. And that is Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, and I don't know, some other lady. I'm kidding. I don't. All right, so for Renaissance art, you've got the top four. We're going to talk about some of the big names. We're not going to go into real great detail, but we're going to talk about some of the breakthroughs and some of the big, the big Renaissance artists, the ones that you definitely need to know. The top four breakthroughs, this is oil paint on stretched canvas, and I don't know who this is. I've never seen this painting. I'm kidding. This is the Mona Lisa, and I think I said this the other day. I have always been in, those two camps, two schools of thought, whether or not she's just looking plaintively or smiling. I am in the smiling camp. I think she's smiling. I bet you're smiling right now too, because Coach Dalvitt's gone today. But anyway, that is the Mona Lisa by Leonardo DiCaprio. Da Vinci. There we go. Okay. Number two is perspective, and basically, perspective shows depth. Based on a couple of principles, and that is the use of things like shadows, things like geometric designs, making things smaller towards the, making it look like things are farther away, so you've got a background and a foreground. And this is the Piero della Francesca. No, this is the Ideal City by Piero della Francesca. I'm sorry, I misspoke. And this one is, I don't know the piece. Hang on. Not used to doing PowerPoints on this. Hopefully it's not. Okay, stop. Just stop there. Okay, so you've got, well, we'll just, I guess, go through this one click by click. So, number three is the use of light and shadow. And the chiaroscuro, which is, there it is basically the use of light and shadow to show the direction of light. And then sfumato is, and I know it's going to go away here in a second, sfumato is the use of tones and colors to shade gradually. And it basically, I can't use my mouse on this presentation, I don't know why, but if you look where the arrows are pointing, we're on sfumato, it's producing kind of like a softened outline, and that's the whole goal of it. Okay, and then you have what we call the pyramid configuration. And the whole idea was this, and so much, not all of it, but a lot of Renaissance art has a pyramid configuration, which makes the image balanced and symmetrical. I'm trying to use my mouse to show you, but if you see the use of the triangles there, you can see that it's balanced, it's symmetrical. And a lot of it, even when we go through the rest of the pieces today, you'll kind of see that they all have kind of this theme. This is the Dreyfus Madonna with Pomegranate by Leonardo da Vinci. Okay, so we've got, we talked about the breakthroughs of Renaissance art. Now we're going to talk about, in the early Renaissance, you've got the first three Hall of Famers, and the first one they give us is Masaccio. And this is the expulsion, or the expulsion of Adam and Eve. And the expulsion of Adam and Eve, shame, shame, shame on them. You can see the pain and anguish and obviously the nudity. But the human figure is not as a linear column. There is, it's very natural looking. Masaccio was considered to be one of the first masters of perspective, showing some depth. And in this work, you can see that there is like a single source of light casting, and it says accurate shadows, but giving you some sense of where the light is and where the shadows actually fall. So that's Masaccio. Oh, and then this one's in your book, I think. I'm sorry, I meant to put this picture in here. Then you have Donatello's David, which was probably around 1430 to 1432. That's what C means. C stands for circa. It's the first life-size freestanding sculpture since the classical period. And contrapposto you don't have a picture to look at, so you're just going to have to imagine with me or find it in your book, or you can Google it. Kids, get your phones out and Google it. Contrapposto basically just means that it's kind of showing a figure that's the weight is shifted, and you're going to find all kinds of artistic explanations of it, but basically it means that you're shifting the weight to show kind of a natural side of it, which the last little thing there says naturalistic, and that's contrapposto and naturalistic really kind of go hand in hand with this. Isn't it beautiful? Yeah. Then you have Botticelli, and this is the Birth of Venus. I don't have the title on here, but again, you can kind of tell that it's really just kind of one of the early breakthroughs of the Renaissance art. It's it's still kind of two-dimensional. It shows some perspective, but it's very idealistic, which is Renaissance. One of the categories of Renaissance art is that it's very idealistic. And then lastly, or the next category is the heroes of the Renaissance. And then there's our man again, Leonardo da Vinci. And if you don't know anything about him, and I'm not one of those people that I'm not an expert on him, but he really is kind of an amazing character, because if you look there, he is, in that world, he's really kind of the epitome of what we would consider to be a Renaissance man. He was well versed in all of those things: anatomy, engineering, astronomy, natural history, music, sculpture, architecture, and painting. And we'll show examples of a lot of these. He was responsible for building canals. He, I wouldn't say he's the inventor, but we think he's one of the earliest to discover a way to use central heating in a building. He drained marshes. He studied air currents and discovered circulation in the human body. He was fascinated by the human body. He invented kind of a flying machine. He had basically prototypes in his notebooks for a flying machine, which included what today we call a heliocopter or a helicopter. And then the principles before a submarine and a tank. And the PowerPoint here says that he has ADHD. We don't know that, obviously, but we do know that he was kind of a little skitsy. He moved from project to project, and a lot of projects he never finished. He only finished fewer than 20 works in his lifetime, which is, when you think about what we know about him, is pretty remarkable. This is The Last Supper, which was painted around 1495. And there's a sketch from his notebooks. On the left is, I'm trying to point with my mouse again, of the heliocopter, which you can see, principally speaking, as a pretty cool idea if you think you're talking about somebody that's doing these things in the 1450s. The notebook on the right, and there are, I don't know how many pages of these there are, but I can remember when a lot of them were revealed when I think I was in college when a lot of these were published. And you can see he's got an idea of what the female womb looks like with a child inside, and there's smaller sketches of that, and I don't know what the other sketches are of, but pretty amazing stuff when you think about his interest in science and the natural world. And moving on to Michelangelo. Michelangelo was actually lived in the home of Lorenzo de' Medici from the age of 15. He's kind of like me. He's a loner. He's very emotional. I'm so emotional and very uncouth. If you don't know what that is, I may be the definition of uncouth. Basically, that means that you're kind of rough around the edges. You're unrefined. But he was equally gifted as a sculptor, a painter, and an architect, and he was also a poet and an engineer. Upon his death at age 89, he's quoted as saying, "I regret that I am dying just as I am beginning to learn the alphabet of my profession." And there's a beautiful sculpture of the Pietà. And that is also Michelangelo's David. Girls, avert your eyes. These are two successive paintings. We'll show two here of the Sistine Chapel. You've probably seen this 100 times by now, even as a child. And this is also from the Sistine Chapel, showing the drunkenness of Noah. And then his architecture, and this is one that I wasn't as familiar with. I kind of had to look some of it up, but this was actually commissioned by Pope Paul III, and the Campidoglio was not finished in his lifetime. It was actually completed in two different stages. The first completion happened in the 1600s, years after his death. And then, believe it or not, the paving designs that you actually see there were not finished until the 1900s, and I've never been able to find an exact date on it. But, you're talking about something that happened, the actual finishing touches weren't put on it, even though it was his design, until close to 300 years after his after his death. And that's, I believe, in Rome. And then you have Raphael. Raphael was very beloved. He's probably the best example of his art. Basically, it says expresses most completely the art of the High Renaissance. But he was a master painter by 17, and he was commissioned by the papal court at the age of 26. And this is his painting that is in the Vatican, actually, called the School of Athens. And these are paintings that are basically represents the great philosophers. And I would say that's tremendous use of perspective. And then you had Titian, who we consider to be the father of modern painting. And you can see that, it says his main expressive device, he uses strong colors, a red background for warmth, things like that. And this is the Bacchanal of the Andrians of 1518. Okay, and then we have the 4 R's of Renaissance architecture. Rome itself was based on the Roman ruins. You had columns and rounded arches and the domed rotundas, much like we'll see a classic example of a dome here in just a minute. And then rules, they had really hard and fast rules on how things were to be built, on theories and treatises, which, if you think about the last two, that really, they all kind of go hand in hand. The reason or the rational basis for it is all grounded in math and engineering. The structures are sound. If you can visit them today, they hold up. And then arithmetic, which gives us the ideal proportions and mathematical ratios, and that's why you see lots of uses of circles and squares in the architecture of the Renaissance. And there's Brunelleschi's dome called the Duomo, and I think this is in Florence, I believe. One of probably the Medici family commissioned this, I think, because this was the dome of one of the wool, not a factory, but where the workers gathered. Okay, and we do have two Renaissances. If you finished reading the chapter, that you know this, and the major differences between the Italian Renaissance and the Northern Renaissance. And I'm not going to read through all of these, but you can see, especially with what they really hold to be the highest ideals, whereas the Italians dealt with beauty. Northern Renaissance, so think the Scandinavians, the Germanic countries, dealt with intense realism, and in the art of the Northern Renaissance, you really see it. It stands out. The very last piece that we'll identify, which is one of my favorites, believe it or not, your teacher has a favorite piece, or one of my favorite pieces from the Northern Renaissance is the very last one, and I'll talk about it when we get there. But the Italians believed in simplified forms as far as style, and the Northern Renaissance was very lifelike, and a lot of times it was very unflattering. In other words, when they painted somebody, it was very real looking. If somebody had imperfections in their face, or there was an imperfection in the scene that they were painting, it was there, and that was because they considered it to be lifelike. Some of these things are very similar, religious and domestic scenes, and then with the Italians, more mythological. But you can see, going from figures to portraits to technique, there's a pretty decent contrast. But the impetus for all of this is very similar. The reason, the rationale, how the things that drove them to make these works of art and architecture, and even I would consider the literature that comes out of this period, is all driven by very similar things. So in the Low Countries of the Northern Renaissance, you have Jan van Eyck, the brother inventor of oil painting, an expert portraitist, and then Hieronymus Bosch, which, he has kind of weird dream imagery and moralistic but sometimes horrifying images. And Pierre the Bruegel the Elder, who documented kind of real life, a peasant life, unromantic. There's not, these idealistic scenes. It's day-to-day stuff. And there's Van Eyck's Arnolfini wedding. Two just gorgeous individuals being wed there with a cute little doggy. And then Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights. I've seen this a number of times, and it just, I don't know. There's something about it that's just really weird. It seems really weird to me. I'll let you soak it in for a second. And Bruegel's Peasant Dance. And if you notice, it is very lifelike. It's very realistic. They're drinking. They're more than likely, I would say, in the steins there, they probably have some kind of ale, and it has a kind of a dark landscape. It's very realistic. There's a couple kissing in the background. They're dancing. Somebody looks like they're playing an instrument there. So um, pretty cool piece of art there. The German Renaissance, you've got Hans Holbein, who did princely portraits. He's the court painter to Henry VIII, which we haven't really talked about him yet, and set the standard for portraits for the next 3 centuries. And then of the German, or the Northern Renaissance, my favorite is Albrecht Dürer. He's considered to be the first Northern Renaissance man. He was fascinated with nature and botanical study and science. Probably his most notable, you'll see his self-portrait a lot, because he does numerous self-portraits, but he's really kind of the first to use any kind of print making as a medium for art. But I think he's probably most known for his wood cuttings, and these wood cuttings are absolutely fantastic. And these are the last couple of pieces that we'll see. And these are Holbein, but we went through the artists, now we're going through their pieces. So there's Holbein's portraits. And there's a self-portrait of my guy, Albrecht Dürer. And you notice there on the left of the painting, it says 1500, and it's got his initials there, AD. Same as mine. And there's a rabbit by Albrecht Dürer. And then the last one is my favorite of the Northern Renaissance, and that is Night, Death, and the Devil. And that is an engraving, believe it or not. That's a really, really, in my opinion, a really cool piece. Okay, we're done. You guys have a good rest of your day, and I will see you guys on Monday.